American missiles just tore 3 boats apart off the Venezuelan coast, leaving 17 people dead. 17 people. Gone in a flash. Washington claims these were cartel drug runners, a direct threat to U.S. national security. Caracas, on the other hand, calls it an unprovoked act of war. Meanwhile, an F-35 squadron sits in Puerto Rico, their stealth capabilities a stark reminder of American air power, and a U.S. destroyer group steams through the Caribbean, its Aegis missile systems on high alert. So tonight we're asking one blunt, urgent question. Is this the opening shot of a full-blown conflict, or is something far more complicated, and perhaps even more dangerous, unfolding? It all kicked off on September 1st. U.S. forces released stark footage of precision strikes against small vessels, allegedly loaded with cocaine. Over the next 7 days, 3 more boats were hit, and the death toll tragically climbed to at least 17 people. The Pentagon says these boats were flagged by intelligence, linking them directly to the notorious Tren de Aragua gang, a group the U.S. has already labeled a foreign terrorist organization. But here's where it gets messy. Caracas denies any state connection to these shipments, vehemently warning that U.S. ships are now legitimate targets if they dare enter Venezuelan waters. Within hours, President Maduro dramatically expanded his own military authority, placing coastal missile batteries on high alert and preparing for a potential state of emergency. Many experts, and even some U.S. lawmakers, are questioning the legality of these lethal strikes, especially since no evidence of drugs or weapons has been publicly provided, and traditional interdiction methods weren't used. Let's be clear, relations weren't always this raw. For 2 decades, Washington has accused Venezuela's socialist governments of narco-trafficking, hitting Caracas with layers of sanctions that effectively choked off oil exports and sent their economy spiraling. Caracas, in turn, has consistently accused the U.S. of plotting coups and backing opposition figures like Juan Guaido. It's a deeply entrenched cycle of mistrust. Remember 2018? The Council on Foreign Relations then warned that any full-scale invasion of Venezuela would need well over 100,000 troops and could easily trigger a prolonged, brutal guerrilla conflict. That analysis, you can bet, still sits on desks in Washington, acting as a cold shower for the more hawkish voices. But if you look at the hardware, the anxiety makes sense, doesn't it? F-35s in Puerto Rico don't just sit there. They give the U.S. air superiority within minutes. Aegis destroyers carry Tomahawk missiles that can reach Caracas. U.S. Southern Command, or SOUTHCOM, has certainly floated contingency plans for rapid regime change if ordered, even if their public statements lean towards democratic solutions. And President Trump, campaigning on a tough-on-cartels platform, publicly vowed to wipe traffickers off the map. Put it all together, and the pieces fit a classic pre-combat buildup. Isolate, demonize, strike, then escalate. It's a playbook many have seen before. The Trump administration has even formally notified Congress that it considers itself in a non-international armed conflict with drug cartels, framing these strikes as self-defense. But a full-scale invasion? That's another beast entirely, isn't it? Venezuela is huge, easily twice the size of Iraq, with dense jungle terrain that heavily favors defenders. Its militias and colectivos, armed pro-government groups, number in the hundreds of thousands ready to fight. A U.S. occupation wouldn't just face roadside bombs and sniper fire, it would trigger massive global diplomatic fallout. America's European allies have already started to distance themselves from these airstrikes, and key U.S. lawmakers are demanding congressional authorization before any further action. Top Pentagon officials are quietly reminding the White House that every warship tied down in the Caribbean is one less asset for deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. Costly, messy, unpopular. That's exactly the mix Washington usually tries to avoid, especially when the domestic political calendar is looming. So, if invasion seems irrational, why do both sides keep swinging? For Washington, the immediate payoff is domestic. Voters in Florida and Texas genuinely hate drug gangs and love to see visible action. Each strike dominates a news cycle, signaling toughness without triggering a draft or body counts on CNN, something the public doesn't have the stomach for. For Caracas, standing up to the colossus next door rallies nationalist support and effectively drowns out internal protests over the collapsing economy. Both leaders, it seems, gain more from controlled confrontation than from a peaceful resolution. In strategic jargon, it's called gray zone conflict, staying just below the threshold that would force the other side into a shooting war they truly don't want. Put all the evidence on a balance scale, and the heavy side tips toward more targeted strikes, not Marines storming a beach. Expect additional U.S. interdictions at sea, more sanctions on Venezuelan officials, and increasingly sophisticated cyber operations targeting cartel finances. Expect Caracas to answer with aggressive naval patrols, perhaps even Russian or Iranian intelligence sharing, and certainly more fiery speeches at the United Nations. Expect oil markets to twitch with every headline and neighboring countries to quietly prepare refugee contingencies. What you really shouldn't expect tonight is an American flag waving over Miraflores Palace. The price is simply too steep, the payoff too uncertain, and the election calendar too short for such a drastic move. So no, the United States isn't marching into Caracas this month. But the Caribbean is now a live fire range, a volatile theater where one misidentified boat or one itchy trigger finger could instantly turn a shadow war into a very real, very hot one. If you want to understand how these global conflicts are reshaping our world, watch our breakdown on the conflict in Gaza next. Hit subscribe for concise geopolitics without the noise and drop a comment below. Do you think these strikes will stay limited, or will they spiral into something bigger?